We'll get going. Hi, I'm Vicky Ann, founder and director from Creative Recruiters. Welcome to the Creative Studio Insider podcast. My special guest today is Robin Sinclair, who is the Creative Services Manager at Save the Children. Thanks so much for joining us today, Robin. I've been so looking forward to our chat.
Oh, morning, Vicky Ann. Yeah, pleasure to be here.
I noticed in the background a Save the Planet t-shirt. Tell me a bit about that.
Oh, yeah, look, that's one of the campaigns that we're running as part of our advocacy for children and young people, because we see climate change as really fundamentally being a child rights issue. Not that it's our role to lead from that, but to empower kids and young people to have a voice about it. So we are supporting the school strike that they have organised today in all around Australia, actually. I think this is the third or fourth event that they've held. So yeah, it's a really important issue and probably the most important long-term issue facing children and young people today, I think.
It must be incredibly stressful for the generation. I've watched the first two of the Greta documentary that is currently showing, I think, on Netflix. And, you know, my partner and I, of course, we are, you know, very, very worried about the environment. We do everything that we can, but to see the angst and the anxiety, not just on Greta's face, but all of the kids marching, and you know, it's really a problem, you know, for them longer term. That must be incredibly distressing. How are you seeing it play out?
Well, yeah, I empathise with their anxiety about the future that they are going to inherit, and I guess the important thing is that their voices and opinions are heard. So that's really what part of Save the Children is trying to do as an organisation, is simply to empower them and facilitate them to have a voice and to be heard, because their opinions really matter. So yeah, I think that's all we can do, and that can help to alleviate some of that anxiety, I think, because it's really important that people are heard rather than ignored. And too often children and young people aren't listened to. And on this, I think they have a very important message to give.
Well, Greta's certainly doing a good job of that as well.
Yeah.
How have you seen the landscape change for what it is that you're doing at Save the Children with regards to climate change? You know, one of the things that we're learning, of course, is that there are so many people having to move from what they've called their homes, and they've had to become refugees in other lands because of climate change. How do you see that play out at Save the Children?
Yeah, of course, it's an enormous problem already all around the world. And one of our specific interests is in the Pacific, and again, giving them voice to the concerns that they've got about the very real threat to their lives and livelihoods and futures. But on a more general level, I mean, I think it's just something that is growing in awareness. I think the understanding that it is such an important issue for young people and for them to be heard on it is only now just gaining awareness, and really we have a communication task ahead of us, I guess, to get people to understand that that's the case and that it really is a child rights issue. And that's why we should be involved, because people often see an organisation like ours as much more of a sort of a traditional band-aid, sticking solutions, short-term solutions onto problems. But this is a long-term problem that needs most of all to be discussed in the first place and brought into prominence.
You started your career in agency land before you found yourself at Save the Children. Can you give our listeners a bit of a summary about your career journey so far?
Yeah. So I started off in small studios, actually. Started off in design studios and then moved into direct marketing. So I was a direct marketing copywriter for many years and worked through small independents and then up into some of the larger mainstream agencies as they brought in direct marketing as a skill set into what they were offering, and then became a creative director in some of those agencies. And then for many years I ran my own agency as well. So I've kind of had a good variety of activities before that. But within my own agency, I worked a lot with not-for-profits as well. So it's always been an interest, as well as balancing the other side of my work, which was mainly financial services and retailing energy.
And what is it like working for a not-for-profit, having come from those other types of businesses?
Yeah, it's been a fantastic transition for me. I think, as I say, working for agencies and coming from agency land and having many not-for-profits as clients, I did have some perceptions about what it would be like, and it's always good to have your perceptions completely overturned, which I think is what happened to me. I initially, I suppose my thought was that it wouldn't be as demanding in terms of workload and pressure to get work out. I thought I'd done it all in agency land. And secondarily, I guess I was under the misapprehension that the best talent was in the agencies and that perhaps the quality of creative talent wouldn't be the same within a not-for-profit. And I certainly found at Save the Children that's not the case at all. The amount of work that we do and the variety of work and the workflow is ginormous and endlessly fascinating, but there is a lot of pressure, and we work under a lot of time and resource and pressure to get stuff out. But the quality of the people I've been completely blown away with. They're really interesting, passionate, talented people that I have the pleasure of working with as part of my team. So that's probably been one of the greatest pleasures and good things about having my perceptions overturned. The other thing I think most of all that I really found challenging when I started was the depth of discussion about ethics of what we do. Of course, there's ethics in agency land. I mean, there's always an important distinction between communicating for persuasion versus manipulating people's responses, which we never crossed that line. But within a not-for-profit, the discussions go much deeper within the team when we're creating work within the broader organisation, and it involves not just what we say, but how we say it and how we're representing the people that we're talking about. So I found that really fascinating and quite challenging for me in many ways, because it's challenged some of my perceptions, and I've had to change my opinions, which I think is quite good when you've been working in an industry for 20 or 30 years and you suddenly have to question what you've been doing.
And it's very nice to get that surprise, you know, so many years later. And speaking of your team, what is the makeup of the team? What type of job titles, what type of responsibilities sit within your team?
Well, as a creative services team, we're sort of a unit within marketing, I guess. And so I have designers and writers working for me, or with me, I guess. We try to work as a fairly flat structured collaborative team. And then we work very closely with a digital team that do a lot of the technical delivery of it, but also help that we have social media specialists within that team. So we work closely together as a broader team. So altogether, there's probably about 12 of us in those.
Is that right? Well, that's a big creative team.
Yeah, it is, but for the amount of work that we pump out, that's probably well under resourced, because we're pretty flat chat the whole time. And there's so much that we want to do, you know, that we'd love to get out there. So,
well, you're speaking to the right person if you need resources, don't forget.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So for your team, you know, what's the main goal when working for an organisation like Save the Children? You know, is it awareness, increased support, donations?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, primarily, our role is to support the fundraising team. So that's creating communications that help us fundraise. We run 5 main appeals a year. There's obviously the big things around tax year end and Christmas, but there's also shoulder appeals. But they're our sort of mass appeals that are thematically and set in the calendar. We also, of course, respond to emergencies as they occur. We've just started an appeal recently about the COVID situation in India, and that's sort of responding to events, the bushfires earlier last year we had to respond to. But we're also working with our philanthropy team, you know, and gifts and wills and corporate partners and stuff like that to create communications that are appropriate for them, which is slightly different from our mass donor audience. But more than that, I suppose overall our role is ultimately to tell the stories of the people that we work with. So they're usually people who don't have a voice in mainstream media or in society generally. So marginalised people, young people, as we were talking about with climate change, really don't have, are not being listened to in terms of the value of what they've got to say. So trying to empower those people to have a voice is really most of all our aim.
Some of my research was telling me that Save the Children support key advocacy campaigns such as Stop the War on Children. Can you tell me a little bit about that program?
Yeah, well, there was a campaign. It is an ongoing campaign, but we really were working with that as a primary international focus across, because it's an international organisation. So we have these international advocacy campaigns that we work on. And again, that was to highlight the fact that children are not just sort of accidental casualties of war. They're often used and specifically targeted as part of conflicts now. And schools are shelled, hospitals are hit, you know, with mothers and babies being killed and injured. And it's actually a common thing in conflict now and seems to be a growing problem. So the campaign was to highlight that and to let people know things that we can do, because it does even impact Australia. There's children in internally displaced people camps in Syria, kids that are Australian kids that can't be repatriated at the moment to Australia, that we are campaigning for that to happen. And there is also an issue of Australia's weapons and weapon technology that gets exported to countries that get involved in conflicts that target children. So we want to bring awareness about that as well as an issue. So these sort of campaigns, and the next main international campaign that we're working on is this one about empowering kids to have a voice about climate change as well. So yeah, the advocacy campaigns are a fantastic and interesting part of what we do.
And how has the current environment, you know, with COVID and the lockdown, how has you and your team needed to adapt to this new way of working? And do you feel it's had a positive impact or a negative impact on the creativity of the team?
Yes, it's been really surprising. Because I think it's been a challenge for everyone. I think it's had a surprisingly positive impact. Yeah, it's not without its challenges. We were fairly well placed to move to work from home. We already had a policy in place where we had staff working from home 1 or 2 days a week if they wanted to before COVID hit. We had the technologies in place. We just moved from Skype to Microsoft Teams as a sort of a collaborative communications tool. And when the first main lockdown, we're based in Melbourne, so when the first main lockdown happened early last year, we were able to transition probably within 24 hours to get everybody set up at home and working collaboratively. I think the biggest thing has been that it's meant that we've had to be really conscious about how we work together to, we already ran regular whip meetings and stuff, but it's a really important part now where we get together a couple of times a week to talk about what we're doing and then having regular catch-ups and using the technology to stay in touch. It's a more of a conscious thing because I suppose you don't have that sort of corridor collaboration that we had before, so you have to make an effort for those communications to happen. But productivity increased for us, and I think the quality of our creative probably even went up over the past 18 months.
What do you think caused that?
Perhaps responding to the challenge, that it was challenging, that there was concern that we would lose touch with each other as a team, that our work would suffer. So I think everybody made a greater effort. I think also working from home can be very productive. You know, if you're disciplined about it, it saves time and stuff. We now do try to catch up in the office once or twice a week for meetings, and it's a great thing to actually see people. It's a different interaction, I think, face to face, but balancing up with working from home seems to have made us more productive and creative, I would say.
It's interesting. It's certainly a common theme. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing your studio now, and how do you see the studio perhaps evolving and changing over the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, it's probably the flip side of what I just said, of working from home can create a more siloed approach, that you're working individually and that you're not getting the stimulation of random interactions with people within the organisation that can stimulate other thoughts and ideas and stuff. So it's probably that, and not being dominated, not allowing the technology, I suppose, to dictate the way we work. The technology really should be a facilitator and an enabler of collaboration rather than dictating the way we work, if that makes sense. So, I mean, I think keeping the human interaction is the most important thing.
It's certainly been our experience as well that, you know, in so many ways we are way more productive working from home simply because of what we do. But we have gone back in 3 days a week. And, you know, whilst I'm cursing the traffic and I'm thinking I could be sitting at my desk working, when you're together, there's just that certain something, isn't there, that you realise as a human that we actually do really need, and that is that connection.
It's certainly been interesting onboarding people who've joined, especially during the period where we weren't working physically face to face at all. And I think that was very challenging for them. We developed new protocols to help do that, and sort of gave people buddies that could help them, you know, gave them a couple of buddies to help them through the first couple of weeks, and had a very structured introductory program with lots and lots of not face-to-face, Teams meetings individually or with a couple of people. But I think it's still quite challenging. And then when you actually get to meet them face to face, it's like a revelation. It's a whole new aspect of the personality. And it's a much richer interaction, obviously.
It really is. I caught up with a client recently for the very first time in person, and he opened the door and I'm like, whoa, you are super tall.
Yeah, the physical things are quite interesting, aren't they? Yeah,
absolutely. Can you talk us through some of the tech that you guys are using quite regularly? You mentioned that you swapped from Skype to Microsoft Teams. Is there any other tech stack that you guys are using that you could share with us today?
Yeah, as I say, I think we were quite well set up. We were moving that way already. There has been a concerted investment in technology within the organisation, not just for the comms and creative teams, but across the organisation, because I think there's a realisation that, you know, it's just so important for the sustainable functioning of any organisation, and the sort of organisation that we run. It's a really important part of where we're headed. So there's been that investment, which is fantastic. So we use Teams, yeah, as sort of a collaborative tool to talk and to meet and to share documents on the fly and discuss things. And we work internationally, so I'm often working with people in Europe and UK. I've been doing a project with someone in Turkey just recently, and barring time differences, it's actually quite seamless. I could be working with someone in the next suburb just as easily as I'm working with someone in Europe. And so I've found that to be a fantastic, empowering sort of tool. We also use Podio as our project management system.
Podio.
Podio, yeah.
Hey, I haven't actually heard of Podio before.
It's just a project management system whereby we can share work and have central places where we can collaborate on versioning and stuff like that. Operates in a similar way to a lot of other project management software. It is a little bit siloed, I would say, and so that you do need to make an effort to connect the dots as a project moves through, and especially when you're working on large projects that might have multiple elements, from, you know, direct mail to social media to video or whatever, and you're trying to pull them together under the one campaign banner. It is a little challenging, but it's still took me a while to get used to, but again, I think it's a useful tool when used in the right way. The people how the people use it and the people using it is more important than the tool itself. I think, you know, it's a matter still of having good communication. We use SharePoint for storage and archiving of files, but we also have something we call the Content Hub, because we're a global organisation. We have a global library of case studies and images and video footage that gets shot and shared from all the organisations around the world. And that's a really useful tool for us. And that means that as an international organisation with different groupings from all different countries, we all work to the same protocols. So the same protocols of especially getting consent, informed consent from the people we capture content and interviews with, but we can also store the data to a very high level of security, because it works to sort of EU standards of data security, which is really important when you're dealing with the sort of stories and people that we work with.
The history inside of those archives must be fascinating. I mean, do you think the videos and the interviews and everything that are stored on there must go back for years?
They do go back for years, though. We have a protocol whereby we only use materials for 5 years. After that, it gets archived. So it doesn't probably have as much currency, but B, it's also about the privacy of the people that we deal with, because obviously when you put material out into the world, it can exist there forever on the internet now, but we make sure that people the consent that they give is only valid for 5 years. So, and they can withdraw that consent at any time to have their image or story not used, because sometimes you're dealing with people who are in insecure situations, and our prime protocol, I suppose, is to do no harm. So there's no point in developing communication materials that are supposedly supporting someone if you're putting their life in danger. So, you know, but you're right, the material on the Content Hub is fascinating and really interesting stuff. Yeah.
Tell me about, you know, a project that you are the most proud of and why.
Lots of projects, yeah. And it's not to discount the work that I did when I was working with agencies and doing commercial work. I really enjoyed the quality of the craft and the ideas and the people that I worked with in all of
Yeah.
those situations as well. But perhaps
In recent
if I had to,
times, yeah. It saved
sorry.
we'll be particular and we'll say it saved the children.
Oh, save the children. Well, because I was going to give you another example,
Oh,
actually,
well,
of a
no,
job that I
yeah, bring
did
it on.
with.
Bring it on.
Yeah, well, we're collaborative
Yeah.
in this sector. A job that I did with Oxfam many years ago, Oxfam Unwrapped, which was the gift giving program. People kind of think of it as giving a goat for Christmas or whatever.
Yeah, I think I got one.
Yeah, a goat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons I was so proud of that, I suppose, is because of its longevity. I mean, it's still going now. It's long after my initial involvement with it. But I think what we did is we gave new life to the concept. The idea was around they were using it in the UK, but in a very sort of serious, worthy gift giving sort of thing. And when we launched it here in Australia, we brought the idea that gift giving should be fun, and that it's sort of a more of a novelty gift, even though that there was a good intention behind it and a good outcome into what you were doing. It's a fun exchange, and it was a fun exchange of ideas. So the catalogues that we initially created for that, which we're using the anthropomorphizing of animals, goats and stuff like that, which is kind of fun in itself, but using fun language and lots of punny stuff. But it made the process fun. And I think that really resonated with a new audience that we were trying to connect with. And the result was, a campaign that delivered millions and millions of dollars to good programs that were helping people around the world. So the longevity and I suppose the fact that so many other organisations did similar things afterwards is always a good sign that you've done something good. Yeah.
It is. And look, it's incredibly memorable. I remember receiving that as a gift and also giving it as well and as a gift. And, it was smart, it was fun, and it was just a brilliant opportunity to be able to give back.
Yeah, and I think that's the way good ideas work. They should kind of work easily, and that one did. It just worked because you're taking what is essentially a human truth. The idea that people enjoy giving gifts, that it's a pleasurable exchange between individuals, and just putting a creative execution onto that makes it come to life. And then everything flows from there. It was very easy to do, and everybody seemed to get on board. And we had a lot of people obviously helping and giving assistance to make that happen. But when the idea is right, when it's aligned with a sort of a basic human truth, everything seems to work very easily. So,
Absolutely. My
fun
final
thing.
question to you is that I like to ask my guests is, what is it that you know now that you really wish you'd known early on in your career?
Yeah. Or perhaps a skill that I had too early on in my career, especially as a creative director. I think maybe it was my misapprehension as a creative director, or even as a creative coming through the creative ranks, that it was all about your idea and it was about big ideas. And I think sometimes creative directors are looked at as the person who is the generator of the great ideas and directs them down to their team to execute. Whereas I think now I have come right around to seeing the creative director as being a facilitator and somebody who empowers other creatives to do great work, and that you get much better work when you harness the skills and the creativity of the whole team, rather than being someone who dictates from on high. So I think I wish I'd known that earlier in my career. I think it's something that I've tried to develop in recent times, and that seems to make work more enjoyable and productive and creative, I think.
For everyone involved.
Yeah, exactly. Because
Robin,
the industry we're in should be fun, I think.
oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, in order to keep up the creativity, it
Yeah,
needs to
yeah,
be as light as you can possibly make it. And unfortunately, for a lot of creatives, it's not. You know, the pressure of time, the pressure of environment, the pressure of all sorts of things going on can really suck
yeah,
that creativity
yeah.
away.
Well, those forces are always there, but that's why you need to make the effort to collaborate and make it a fun, enjoyable, creative process, which it can be. Yeah.
Absolutely. Robin, thank you so much for your time today. I've thoroughly enjoyed having this chat with you.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much, and take care.
Same to you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.